Welcome, everybody. We are on the air. Welcome to the Policy and Services Committee meeting. It is Tuesday, October 8th, and it's 6-ish. It's nice to have you all here tonight. And I'm going to guess most of you are here for the discussion about art. Am I correct? Would you nod? So with that, would the four of you be comfortable if we switch numbers 1 and 2 so that people don't have to sit through our discussion of boards and commissions? I figured you might be. Okay, so would you call the roll?
Holman?
Here.
Klein?
Here.
Niss?
Here.
Price? Here. 4 present.
All here and accounted for. So I think with that, we're going to put the boards and commissions application revisions to the back, and we're going to pull the public art discussion up to the front. At the moment, I have Kathleen Cavanaugh as the only person who wants to speak on this. Yeah, no, we don't have any. No.
No cards, okay.
No,
All right.
no. And Rihanna, my apologies for not getting to meet with you ahead of time. However, there may be others of you who want to speak, and if so, there should be cards over there. Just fill them out. If you get motivated to speak while we're talking, you can go up and talk and then fill out a card later. So thank you all for being here. So the first item tonight is to provide direction regarding the proposed public art program for private developments, public art master planning process, and a staffing plan to support the public art program. I think what I will do with this, Pam, do you want to talk to this first before we turn it over to the art staff or not?
No, actually the presentation will be made dual by Assistant Director of CSD, Raina Halpern, as well as Elise DeMarzo from the Public Art Commission. She's the Public Art, what is your actual title? I don't
Manager of the Public Art Program.
Manager of the Public Art Program.
In that case, thank you both for being here tonight. I know this is an exciting proposal and one that was introduced, as I recall, by our mayor, Gail Price. Karen, I think you were on that memo? No?
Not on that one.
Who else is on the memo? Help me out.
Pat.
Okay, so only one of us was on that original memo, and that was Councilmember Price, and so I'm sure she is going to want to talk to that. So with that, proceed ahead.
Great, thank you. Good evening. I just also wanted to note that
The mic's not on.
Molly Stump is also here, and she was heavily involved in this preparation too, which we're grateful for.
And I should just, for full disclosure, as we do tell you that I did meet yesterday with some of the staff, and we discussed some of the legal issues as well as the other aspects of it. Okay, welcome again.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to present the staff recommendations on private developments and public art tonight. The intent of including public art and private development is to, 1, reflect the creative and vibrant community that lives, works, and visits here. 2, to enhance the visual landscape of our city. And 3, to create a sense of place, identity, and civic pride.
While you take a breath, we are anxious to know what that is.
With that, that's just what I was going to refer to. With that, we have a short PowerPoint that we'll walk you through, and I wanted to tell you exactly what that was. That is public art on a parking garage wall in Santa Monica, the 3rd Street Mall, and the artist is Ball Nogue Studio. And it really is a beautiful piece that dresses up the garage really nicely. So we can go to the second slide. I wanted to let you know that over the last few months since the colleagues' memo, we've done a lot of research into best practices across the nation, and with a focus on California. We researched over 70 cities with public art programs to find out how they work with private developers, we have found that 48 cities in California have a public art policy for private development. And our research includes cities like Santa Monica, Walnut Creek, Pasadena, and San Francisco. A couple main points that you've seen in the staff report and the attachment of the grid that shows the research are the in lieu options for developers. A lot of cities that do have this policy for private development do include an in lieu option. And that seems to, sometimes it's incentivized, and that seems to be something that's been very popular and successful that we can go into later. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elise for the next few slides.
Thank you. So to be clear, the qualifying projects, and this is outlined in the report, must meet both of these criteria, not either or. So they would need to be commercial developments, additions, or reconstruction over 10,000 square feet and with a minimum construction value of $200,000. So in looking at the data of projects, of building projects over the past 3 years, it appears that that would not impact the majority of the smaller mom and pop shops, the smaller businesses that are along California Avenue, University, and El Camino. As for exemptions, you can see them here as they're outlined in the report. This seemed like the most logical place to put the exemptions. It's in keeping with a lot of the research we did with other cities. And if a project hits both of the criteria, the 10,000 square feet and the budget threshold, the developer may choose to commission artwork at their development site or to pay the in lieu option. So, so the choice is really in their hands. And this is a listing of the assistance that will be available to developers. So in reaching out to a number of developers, they wanted to make sure that that we had resources available. So there are recommended artists, there are consultants that would be made available to them. You know, project management assistance could be offered to them, and advice about best practices in public art. So we would be equipped to assist them with a number of these things, with all of these things.
So we wanted to stop there and just answer any questions that you might have.
You know, we don't normally do this, but I think we might want to hear from the public now, just to hear what their questions are, and then we'll kind of fit in behind that, since we just have one card. But you know, I will give you more than one bite of this apple tonight because I think it's a great topic and fascinating to discuss. Kathleen, I know you're here.
Yes.
So do you want to come up and speak first, and we'll give you 3 minutes?
Absolutely. Right here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Am I on?
Uh-huh.
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Kathleen Cavanaugh. I'm a Palo Alto resident and a recently appointed public art commissioner. I was here in February when you appointed me. Thank you for that. And I wanted to speak tonight just in support of the 1% for Art memo. First of all, I think it's been a lot of great work. I'm part of the staff. I've also personally gone out and done some interviews with some developers, and I have spent my career working in this real estate and construction environment. And so I know a little bit about these projects. I've done projects ranging from $1 million in construction to $10 million to $250 million. That one was a project I spoke about here in February at Stanford, where we actually did spend more than 1% for art. We weren't required to do so, but we decided to do it because we felt it was a very important move to bring in the public in a different sort of way to the graduate school business, and have found that it was very successful to do so. So that's part of the reason I support this memo from personal experience. I also wanted to say that I do think that it's going to be a careful walk to what I would say is thread the needle between the developer community and the city, because I do think that there are some important nuances that we'd have to be considerate of. But I do think a vision and a plan and just really some clarity of thought about what we're trying to accomplish will go a long way. And I think the vision part is is key. We do need to work with the community and be ready to, I think, link arms and figure out what those points of involvement, collaboration would be. And I guess I will conclude by saying that I agree with the mayor and I think the majority of the city council who say that the great cities have great art. You can think of Chicago, the Millennium Park. You can think of New York, where everywhere you walk, you see public projects, new interesting ones coming out every day. Obviously, some of the great European cities like Paris and Barcelona. But I, interestingly, also had thought of Santa Monica, California, as similar in size, as a very robust commercial district in their town, their city. They also have an incredible residential community, the way that we do in Palo Alto. And I think the way that the arts community has been embraced there, and it's a signature of that community, is one that we in Palo Alto could achieve as well. So thank you for listening this evening.
So while you're there, Kathleen, if I could just ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
Because I know you've had a lot of background in that. What did you find were the biggest stumbling blocks as you went forth, including this on particularly big projects? And was it primarily an actual object, or was it usually in lieu?
So I'm thinking, always the project has been incorporated, so the artwork has been incorporated in the project. I haven't been involved in any in lieu. The biggest stumbling blocks, I would say, is consensus, and that's clearly one that would be always difficult. And so I think, is that the nature of your question? Yeah. It just,
No, that helps a great deal. Good. Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So at this point, Rihanna had stopped and asked us if we have questions. So, committee members?
Yeah, no, actually, I have some comments, but I think I'll wait. I think I'd like to hear the rest of the presentation. And by the way, I think the staff report's fantastic. It covers all the elements that are part of this kind of work and the thorough research. It's great. So I'm going to hold off. I'm going to hold off on a couple of my questions.
Since Chair Niss disclosed that she had met with staff, I also met with Raina and Elise to get, a leg up on this, and some liaison to the Art Commission. It seemed appropriate, and thank you for that opportunity. I do have some questions, some of which I brought up when we met, and some of which not. One is the funding for staff, because our economy goes up and down as development ebbs and flows. It wasn't quite clear to me how much of the funding, the in lieu, could be spent for that staff position, and I don't know if I'll be able to. Let's see, eligible expenses for public art fund, additional labor and contracted services required for the production installation. So that requires, or that applies to literally the artwork itself. But so is there any latitude for funding for the staff to implement such a program?
So what we're recommending in here is that up to 20% of the in lieu public art fund could be used for staffing. And we also say in here that we would like to come back as part of the FY15 budget process with a full analysis of staffing needs. And as you know, we right now have only a half-time public art manager, and who is already basically overwhelmed with work. So we know that needs to change to be able to grow and create a sustainable public art program.
So I guess a better phrase, I guess the question would be, can we sort of front load that staffing position? So right now the economy, city attorney is shaking her head no. Again, because the economy ebbs and flows, we're going to have more money coming in this kind of economy than we will at other times. and that yet the obligation for that staff is going to be ongoing. So that's why I was wondering if we could, maybe it's a city attorney question, if we could sort of front load that staffing funding.
So just to follow up on what Ms. Halpern said, yes, up to 20%, but it's reimbursement of actual costs up to 20% is how it's described in this current draft. So really what we do need to be looking at for the use of those fees is acquiring new art, and then the project management and administration costs that are associated with that, the actual costs up to 20%. So 20% is a cap there, but it's not that there is 20% just generally available for staffing. It's to reimburse for the staffing actually spent associated with the acquiring of those new pieces of art.
Okay. And then one of the things that we talked about, and there wasn't an answer at that time, was if these, if the 1% could be used to restore existing artwork on a site that isn't otherwise required to be maintained. And a Greg Brown mural is a great example of that. So Greg Brown murals are not protected. So could some percent for art funds be used on site to restore, for instance, a Greg Brown mural, or there might be other things too?
So that's an area where we don't have clear guidance that that's a permissible use of this kind of fund, to the extent that you are talking about maintenance of the city's existing public art collection. And that obviously isn't an area that's challenging. There's a wonderful public art collection here that's both installed, and then some of it is in a rotating collection, and it needs to be maintained, restored, administered, and these funds are not available for that. The project management and administration portion that's described here would be associated with the new works that would be funded through this program.
Molly's become an expert in public art in helping us.
So these are,
I get it right? All the
You
things
got
that
it
art
so
needs.
right. I'm so
there is the public art maintenance program, which of course is very important. So just to be clear, these are artworks that are associated with private development projects. So it's the restoration of those, because the Greg Brown murals, for instance, I don't know of any of them that are on public facilities. They're all on private development.
So to the extent that art contributions required under this program are, a developer chooses to provide them by developing art on site on their project, then the ordinance simply says, as a regulatory matter, they will be responsible for the continuing maintenance of those pieces of art. And to the extent that that falls behind and the art is damaged, needs to be replaced, repaired, there's a process for them to come to the city and go back through the Public Art Commission to
But that's new
receive
art.
approval.
That's new art, though, isn't it?
That's correct. That's
So
correct.
there's-
This is a prospective ordinance. And the reason for that is the limitation on the city's ability to tax. So this is not a taxing program. This is an exception to what otherwise are pretty strict rules for impact fees. This is not an impact fee that is supported by a study, a Nexus study. It's an exception to those requirements. It's not a general tax. It's not been approved by the people or gone through those procedural requirements, and not generally available to the city for those purposes. So it sets up, again, two types of new art. Art that, as a regulatory matter, the city's saying you must have art on your site if you build a new project, and the developer chooses to provide it on site. They need to do that. They need to maintain that work going forward. To the extent they want to pay in lieu fees to the city, there's an ability to do that at their choice, and then that will be used to acquire art that the city will then own and maintain. And a portion of those funds can be used for project management, administration, and maintenance of those works.
And I just want to add, we do have some of the Greg Brown murals, for instance, are in our collection. And so anything that is in our collection, we are responsible for maintaining. And we can do that. Every year we chip away at some of the maintenance and conservation needs we have, because we do, like all cities, have an aging collection. And I also just want to offer that in a poll of public art programs, of which there are about 486 in the United States, of what is the #1 problem that you're faced with, it's maintenance and conservation of artwork, because there is no easy solution for budgeting for it. And I think the city of Palo Alto really shows good faith by allocating a small amount of money for us annually to try to keep up with the most important priorities in conservation and maintenance.
And so, good, and thank you. And I should correct myself, too, because, of course, there's a very, very, very good and well-known Greg Brown mural in the post office. So, of course, there's one on a public building.
Could we maybe hold a question or two and let you get through with your presentation? And then we'll probably have lots more questions and so forth.
That was basically, besides from a wrap-up, that's what we prepared, because it's such a big report. We really wanted to give you the time for discussion and questions, et cetera. So thank you, though.
Okay, so you feel you've covered it?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then in that case, Karen, continue.
Well, just a couple more things. In the, I noticed some of the definitions, of course, are not complete, and that's to assume those will be completed before it goes to council. But also in the finding and purpose, did you consider including a sense of place as one of those things? Because I didn't see it here. It's as creating a sense of place.
We have it on the very first page.
I'm reading the ordinance.
Oh, and the ordinance. Oh, yes. We can certainly add that.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think that's pretty important, and it's how you do
Yes.
have an identity.
Thank you for that.
So, yeah, okay. And I think those are my only questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Gail, I think we should go back to you because this, your name actually was on that initial draft, and so I imagine you had some,
Just general
you had
comments.
something specific in mind.
Yes. Basically, I think that the colleagues' memo and the work that you've done really outlines, I think, quite well the issue of the importance of art as part of our experience as human beings. And within cities and in various communities throughout the country and internationally, as you pointed out, there are some extremely effective examples of innovative artwork and various types of artwork, traditional and long-standing and newer pieces and newer installations. So it really is an artistic record that has a long, long history. So I think our feeling was in the original, in the evolution of the memo, colleagues' memo, was that Palo Alto has done a very good job with the limited resources that it's had to date. But many other cities and many other communities have demonstrated extremely robust and effective art programs. And we felt that looking at various examples, which you've done very well, which we deeply appreciate, there are tremendous examples of how the presence of art can really change one's experience. And there are lots of opportunities. And in our city, I think the Public Arts Commission has done a very good job, but again, it's been with limited resources. So the issue of a longer-term cultural arts and art plan also is very commonly done, and as you point out, that really provides the context and the basis for a really well-developed art program. So one of the comments I wanted to make, and I know I made this comment when we were interviewing individuals for the Public Art Commission, was, and you pointed out, although you used different words, the issue of having impactful art. I think one of the things that many cities suffer from, especially smaller cities, is sometimes the artwork tends to suffer from punyism. And because of the diminutive nature of art, some of these art pieces, they really aren't making the kinds of statements that may be appropriate. Now, there are some settings and sense of place and other context that are important, which allows for a range in sort of size, dimension, texture, etc. So, anyhow, I just wanted to make that comment because as you look at art in various communities throughout the world and throughout the country, there are some communities who do this extremely well. And one thing I wanted to add on, which had not been mentioned, I appreciate all the cities that you've looked at, but also transit authorities throughout the country have very vigorous percentage for art programs. So I would encourage you in your looking at this, that some of the procedures and techniques that they use for determining sort of artist eligibility and determining kind of a process like MTA, New York is one, light rail system in Baltimore is another one, and Valley Transportation Authority here has quite a good art program, and I think that that may also be useful because there may be some processes. They also have a lot of community outreach around those kinds of efforts in terms of identifying appropriate art or architectural elements in station design. So I look through your list and I realize that those entities also can be very helpful. So I'll stop there. One question I have is recognizing that, this is to tie on to Councilmember Holman's question, recognizing that there will be fluctuation over time regarding the resources coming in a parallel way. If you are offering your services to contract consulting work out to help a developer, that means we have to have the staff capacity to do that. So when you come back to us, you'll be coming up with a staffing plan and some of the financials around that. But will you also embed in that how you will develop the capacity so that we have the ability to provide the consulting services to the private sector developer? That was one question I had.
So just one clarification, Councilmember Price, is what we actually wrote was that staff could actually be project managers on those private projects or as needed contractors. So that was our way of addressing the capacity issue. So if we have the capacity, we would do it. If not, we would have an approved pool of contractors that we would use. And in that way, you can grow and expand. You can grow and decrease as with the market.
Got it. So you're saying that the additional contracting would be sort of as needed
Exactly.
to enhance the capacity of your staff.
Right. Exactly.
That makes sense. That
Right.
makes a lot of sense. And let's see here.
If that wasn't clear, we'll check it and make sure that it's really clear in the report.
It could have been my interpretation, but those are my general comments and observations. I'm tremendously excited about this. I've seen these kinds of programs all over, and I think this will be wonderful for the city and very exciting, and I look forward to the community process as it relates to the master planning and strategic planning. It's wonderful. I'm just thrilled.
Can I just piggyback on one other comment just to reinforce what you said in terms of impact? I think this is why you see nationally so much success with the in lieu option, because you can pool funds to really make impactful work and also to create work in places that municipalities don't have any public construction projects. If it's in a park or a part of town that just is bereft of public art. This is a way that public art can really help serving the community.
I agree. I'm just so thrilled. I've said it before. I'm thrilled.
Larry, do you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you. Well, a little lower key, but I'm thrilled too. I think this is
This should be music, I think.
Yeah.
I think that particularly at this time in the economic cycle, it really makes a lot of sense. It might not have 2 years ago or 3 years ago when things weren't going quite as well. A couple of questions. Well, one I really appreciated the chart. That's a great chart, and if I had more time, I would have played around with it more, because you can sort of extract various information, and maybe you can do this before it goes to the full council. For example, I would have liked the chart just limited to the 48 cities that have the private development aspect. I was trying to pick that out, but didn't get to it.
We could have highlighted them, maybe that would have worked, yeah.
Well, no, I would just like to see the 48 that do what we're talking about here. And also maybe a sub-chart showing what rates they all charge. Because while we're talking about 1%, we see the consensus around 1%. I did know that some charge more, some charge less.
We do have that.
No.
That's-
Okay.
Could I ask a clarifying question?
Mm-hmm.
Would you like that pulled out for the night that we discuss it at City Council?
Yeah.
Okay, so you'd like those separately identified?
Right. Those two. Maybe when we look at the chart as to who's charging what, that we might say, instead of 1%, some other number, more or less. On the, shifting gears now, on the exemptions, I was trying to think what other entities might be excludable or should be excluded. The one that I came up with was private schools, which we seem to have an increasing number of in Palo Alto. And I don't know whether that's been considered elsewhere, or whether you have any thoughts on that. I'm not committed to it.
I mean, if they were building a private school?
Well, I was thinking of, we've had a couple that, what's the one on El Camino that I'm forgetting here for the moment?
Keys.
Keys, yeah. That was just a couple of years ago. Should we be imposing that on a private school? And Castellea won't be adding again in the near future, I don't think.
Yeah, but I don't mean to interrupt, but I thought this
Yes, you
applied
did.
to developments, yes, which I did. Aren't we talking to building and development?
Yeah.
You're not talking about reuse?
No, I'm talking about
Yeah.
We've
I
had a
didn't-
number of private schools built in Palo Alto over the last 10 years, and just on a square foot basis and cost, they would be subject to this proposed ordinance. And I'm just raising the question as to whether we want to put them in a little different category.
That's an interesting question. Thank you for bringing that up. In the research, private schools, I didn't notice them called out in other cities for exemptions. So I think that's why it didn't come up on our radar
Schools we built in 10
That's
years
something we
that
can
are private.
definitely look at a
Keys
little bit
again.
further. What I will say is that a lot of the schools do voluntarily bring art and murals into their campuses as well. So it may not,
Well,
we can look at that.
I had a child, I think that would be a criteria, that would be like one to send a child to the private school. But it's not quite the same thing as having our bureaucracy involved to whatever extent. And I'm using bureaucracy as a neutral word, not a bad word. We tend to have a sort of a lighter touch with private schools.
Apparently.
Yes, apparently, but not anymore. Just a couple of things for the city attorney. One is just really a minor one. Why do we even have to list Palo Alto Unified School District as an exemption, since we don't have any control over them and their buildings anyway?
I'm not sure that we do. That's an item that we'll look at, and this is a very draft ordinance. That's why it's marked with a watermark, and there are, as Councilmember Holman pointed out, some areas where we haven't even completed the drafting. That's
Well,
one area.
yeah, my guess is that we ought to delete that as soon as possible, because even though it might raise political sensitivities for no good reason.
Oh, how well put.
Appreciate the comment. We'll take a look at that.
On to the use of in lieu fees. Once some developer pays the money into the city, are we legally limited to using it just on new projects? And how in the world are we going to track that?
But we need to have good accounting on the fund, and yes, we do think we are limited to that. The question of public art requirements and in lieu was specifically addressed by the California Supreme Court in the Ehrlich case, and that's actually where the 1% perhaps baseline comes from, because that Culver City program was at 1%. And the court said that that was a permissible general land use regulation, similar to setback requirements, et cetera. The developer's challenge was that, in fact, it was an unsupported impact fee. So there was an open question until the court determined that. It's important that the fee be at the developer's option, and that it be in lieu of providing the art, and so closely aligned with the purpose of actually building the art itself, in order to fall within that exception as being a general land use regulation.
Oh, I understand that, but what the developer, particularly a smaller developer, says they had to pay the 1%, and obviously what the city then decides to do with that money is most likely to be to combine that with other smaller payments to something more impactful, to use that word, in a section of the city. If you're saying we've got to really track that very, very carefully to show that I think that's going to create a certain amount of accounting burden on our staff. For example, if we have Elise running this program, is she going to sit there and say, okay, I spent 2/10 of an hour working on that, then I spent a half hour working on our old collection? And so is she going to have to do that type of bookkeeping, which we don't do right now for most of our staff?
So, 3 things. One is that typically tracking multiple projects is handled by assigning a figure for phases. So let's just say you have a $10,000 public art project, and you have the selection phase, you have the fabrication phase, and you have the installation phase. So we kind of deal with some standardizations to make the tracking work more efficiently, is what I'm trying to say.
That's not where I'm going. I'm saying how Elise or some other staffer's time is divided up during the day between old art, which we can't use this new money for, according to the city attorney's opinion, and the new projects. And the fact whether the new project is in any of those 3 stages really doesn't make any difference. It's the distinction between the existing art right now and new stuff.
We can track it. We
I can say that I have colleagues in other cities, and when they are working on a public art and private development, they very carefully track their time. So when they turn their attention to that project, they sort of start the clock and really carefully track those hours. So it would be a little bit of a shift, but it's certainly doable.
How do your attorneys do that?
And
Gosh, right down to the 6
and
minutes,
we have,
as I recall.
Been talking with.
Yes, but it does funny things to our brains.
I've noticed.
We have been
Not artistic.
talking with with OMB about it to make sure that we have the accountability that the city needs there. So, yeah.
So Ryan has been working very carefully with Lalo and the Office of Management and Budget, and they do have various methodologies that they're recommending that are standard for doing this type of work. And it is not the attorney's standard of tracking to the 10th of the hour. It's more general than that and a little bit more workable, but it will provide the accounting basis that we need in order to track.
It's more artistic.
No.
And Greg Betts really put a comment too on this topic.
I'll just mention that, I think you're very familiar with the contributions we received from a number of different grant programs for the Bressler property, and through SAP, our accounting system, we do have the ability of assigning different project codes per grant, so that when we're audited by various state, federal, and private foundations, or want to be able to track the amount of time on a time card, we do have the ability to divide up the amount of time to particular project codes that relate to either grants or individual pieces of art.
Good, thank you. One last question back to the city attorney.
Are you on?
No, I haven't been on all along.
So to speak.
Probably heard through your, the Supreme Court case that you mentioned, how old is that? Well, just approximately.
I'll have to get you a site.
Well, from your recollection of that case, and then you're mentioning the 1%, which was being used then, do you think that's really a restriction, or whether there'd be a legal problem if we went to 1.25% to pull a number out of the air? And I think there was one city listed in here, and I can't remember whether it's California or not. It's a 2%.
Santa Monica has 2%.
Yeah.
Sacramento has 2%.
There are several at 2%,
Mhm.
so I don't think it's an absolute requirement to stick to that number. And I think that if, as it's a policy matter, if the council wished to add another 0.25%, I'm
Well,
fairly confident I would not make it.
Well, even
change
2% like
the
these other cities are. Okay, good. Thank you.
Can I just add, though, it is highly unlikely to see a different amount for the muni ordinance from the private ordinance, private development ordinance. I haven't seen that.
I wasn't.
You weren't suggesting that, okay.
No, I'm not advocating either. I'm just wanting to sort of free up our minds and say 1% is a very nice number, but other places, a few other places are using different ones, and maybe we ought to take a look at it.
Can I ask you a question, since you raised it, Councilmember Klein? And that is, we were hoping to get input from the committee about the suggestion we make in this report to incentivize the in lieu option by lowering the 1% to 0.95%. That was something we were really interested in your input on. Some cities do it, some cities don't do it. We thought it worthy of putting in, and we're really interested in your input.
Do you want to answer first?
Well,
she put you on the spot.
I feel. Well, you've reversed the situation. That's my reaction when I read that, which is fine. When I saw that, I'd first seen the idea, of course, which we have in a variety of ways in the city right now. We have it on, I think, particularly of housing, between building below market rate housing and just paying something into our BMR fund. And I thought, so I saw the concept before I saw the number. When I saw the number, I said, well, gee, that's really not a lot of incentive. 0.05 of a point, even on a big project, that's going to work out to not very many thousands of dollars. I thought really the incentive is more, if I'm a developer, I would say my incentive is I don't have to bother with this. I don't want to work with artists. They always come in higher than they say they're going to, and I'm just, anyway, you get the idea.
And we're an odd breed.
Well, the developers are an odd breed too, to say nothing of lawyers.
So what's your answer?
My answer was that if you're going to really provide incentive, it's got to be lower than just 0.05 of a point.
So let me pick up from there, because there's several things that we have talked about that I'll respond to, but then I've got a couple of other questions too that are off on a different tangent. Mm-hmm. But the 1% for art is a ring that I like. If you wanted to do 2%, Santa Monica, though, has far more development than we do, by far, without question. And You know, they have buildings that are going up almost constantly all along Ocean. So there's something about 1% for art that I like. It sort of rings and doesn't make me uncomfortable. A discounted 1%, it's not a bad idea. You might drop it a little more than that. You know, maybe it's 90% of the 1% or something like that might you know, really motivate somebody. But I hear what you're saying, and you pronounce your name. It is Raina? Raina.
Or Rye. Rye or Rye.
Oh, I won't get that familiar, but I can just so I get close. But so that's where I'd weigh in on that. As far as, you know, discussing the in lieu versus the actual art, and thinking that through, I think that's a balancing act between how do you like that presentation. And there is there's one building now in Santa Monica that I know they just redid under this same program, which has what I think is just horrendous art in the front. It is what's called the New Modernist, and I know you all know what the New Modernist looks like, which looks like what we grew up with in the 50s, to be honest. For my generation, it's really like that. But it's getting lots of good press. It's all black and white. It's fascinating. But my point being, and where I'm going to lead with this, is art and its acceptance and so forth is always going to be judged. It's in the eye of the beholder. For those of us who have been around long enough, you will recall the Linköping wooden sculpture that was in the corner of Embarcadero and Waverly that was maligned and really was a sad situation. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. And it certainly did not encourage good relations. So I think as we get into this, especially because Raina has really talked about the in lieu, which would give us a fund, and then once again we're in that phase of choosing and who chooses and did you like the piece of art or not. And some pieces of art I've gotten used to over the years that I thought initially were rather bizarre. So thinking of that and thinking of who decides on the art, you know, is the art integral with the building? Is it part of the, as you have mentioned here, there are many different ways, sculpture, painting, installations. Installations are very popular right now. Photography, video, and so forth. All of those you have listed here as art of some kind. I love the whole idea. I don't want to in any way not acknowledge the complexity of moving into this particular area. It's, I think it's been, I have a daughter who lives in Santa Monica, so I'm familiar with it. And I think that they've had lots of good luck with it, and they've had a lot of challenges with it as well. So, as I mentioned, the building that I think is just took my breath away. You know, in addition to the other fabulous art, there's a wonderful piece of art that's on there, Palisades, that is called Solstice. Have any of you seen that? It's absolutely wonderful. It's a wooden sculpture, and if you're ever down on the Palisades, walk along and you'll see it. I've often taken pictures of it because I'm so fascinated by it, and it is an ode to the birth of the new season on December 21st. It's really fascinating. So that's simply to say, I don't think that even though we're excited about it, and I'm not quite as excited as Gail, a little more excited than Larry, but I would that I would say I'm certainly enthused about going through with it, and still know that there will be the occasional discussion about something not unlike the Linköping, or I don't think anyone doesn't like those wonderful twigs or branches outside the library now. I don't know. Yeah, I think those are fabulous. Kids love that. But I'm going to guess that's an installation. It won't be there forever. Am I right?
That's
yeah.
correct.
Yeah. So those would be my comments at this point. I think you have done an enormous amount of work, and you've spelled it out, but at the same time, I'm thinking, what will be the first project that comes along where someone says, well, actually, the art is in the lighting that's designed that's not normally used. And we're saying, okay, well, so doesn't decrease my enthusiasm. It just says, I want to acknowledge that this is not a totally simple program to take on and continue with.
Yeah. A couple things to that.
Well, Gail is waiting too, but is that very germane to what I just said?
Yeah.
Oh, do you mind if Larry adds a tack on?
Well, two things. One, in addition to producing the other charts, Liz raised an interesting point as to how much Santa Monica spends or receives, and I think it would be interesting to pick out a number of cities like Santa Monica of somewhat similar size to see what their actual budget is, not so we don't have to guess, but see what the actual numbers really are.
Good idea.
And the second, I just want to be a staunch defender, just to follow up on Liz's talk about taste. I think that's the last thing the city council ever wants to get involved in.
Please.
I love reading about 19th century France and when the Eiffel Tower was opened, and it was everybody, whatever that means, hated it. And maybe some people still do, but that's not the postcard industry's view of that's the iconic view of Paris, and I think you're going to see that over and over again. So I read all the stuff people say, oh, I don't like this installation of art and all that, and times change and all that, and I'm quite willing to have us be experimental and not worried because somebody's going to say, the Mona Lisa's better, or something along those lines.
I think carefully we said there's not an appeal to the city council woven into this. Gail, we'll go back through again.
Okay, thank you. The issue of exemptions, I know that is very common. That does not mean in any way that you would not totally embrace them if they said, oh, we want to add ABC in terms of artistic, architectural or artistic features. Because quite frankly, I can think of some affordable housing projects where, you make the distinction between an element that is produced by an artist versus by an architect. But in terms of, certainly my takeaway is that we are excluding them from this requirement, but that we assume that in the project review, if there is interest and some time to do this, that it's important. Because these kinds of projects do need, in my mind, artistic enhancement. But I recognize the need and the cost issues. I had a couple of questions, clarification questions. In the staff report, there's a section here that's page 3 when it talks about
which are you on? You're on the draft?
In the staff report itself.
In the staff report itself.
Page 2, packet, page 127. In the top half, it talks about various developers offered the following suggestions. This is a summary that you've contacted developers to assess their level of support. The point that talks about draft contracts with artists that allow developers flexibility should conditions at the site change. Now, can you give us a kind of a second sentence there? Is it that there has been a modification to the site plan or budget modification, or what kinds of things were they? Did they give any examples of what they're talking about?
That's an excellent point you bring up. The case that came up, they were simply talking about wanting to deaccession or move the artwork, relocate it either within the site or take it off of the site. And so that was, one of the developers in particular said, we want to make sure if we're drafting a contract that we have the most flexibility in the future.
Okay, and since you brought this up, the deaccession concept, if a developer has a piece of work they've developed commissioned, and they, at some point in the future, they move, et cetera, will the language of the conditions of approval then, I'm assuming, will make sure that the artwork is retained, that they can't sell that piece of artwork and move on?
The artwork is to remain with the building if the building is sold. And if the developer decides they want to de-accession the artwork, they do have to come to the city. They have to notify the city and go through that policy.
Okay.
It's on page 6.
Yeah, it was. I know it was here somewhere.
Okay.
That was, I think, one of my questions, and I think that was it that I can recall here. Just one. Let me take a quick peek here. Yes. No. I think all my questions have been answered. Oh, comment about the transit agencies. If on your review, if you could add a couple of examples of transit agencies, it's not directly applicable, but the percentage generally is 1% to 2%, and if there are elements of those programs that you might find useful as you develop your programs more, I think it would be a helpful addition, because they do have quite a bit of experience at this as well. So those are my comments and questions.
I really appreciate what you just said, because a lot of the transit authorities have done this optionally throughout the United States without a requirement, because it keeps their stations cleaner, less vandalism, etc. So I think it's this really important, this point about if you're exempt, you're still not prohibited, that you're still, encouraged.
You can still play.
I think that's such an important point.
Yes, I think so. And I think we'll have some very interesting results. I'm nothing but positive and hopeful.
Karen, you want to jump in?
Yes. Well, I'm not going to compete with Councilmember Price's enthusiasm, but it's, well, I won't go into that. But I did have a couple other questions, and I actually realized I had found perhaps an inconsistency in the ordinance, and that has...
It's a very early draft.
Well, for what it's worth, I so appreciate something that's in here that is on the bottom of page 153, packet page 153, the public art requirement for private developments. And it talks about before a certificate of occupancy is issued, that either the in lieu fee will be paid, blah, 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 blah. And I absolutely appreciate that being in there. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Then, though, on packet page 158, which is the ordinance 1661110, the last sentence of that is talking about payment of an in lieu fee prior to issuance of the building permits. So it seems like those are in conflict. So you can resolve that or ignore me on that later. But it seems like it's in conflict.
We're still working through the details of all of those different processes, how the art program will integrate with the city's standard project approval, entitlement, and building program. So thank you for that comment. We'll look at it.
Don't delete it, just to make sure it's consistent. I have some concern that Chair Niss brought up too about, like, well, I wouldn't have otherwise put this handrail in here, blah, blah. So how you, it's a delicate dance. It's very much a delicate dance about what's considered, the art enhancement versus integral to the project. And also how to actually get the artwork integrated into the development of the scheme of the project. It's a very delicate dance. So I'm more enthused about the in lieu fee, but I don't want to preclude the other opportunity, but I think it's challenging. I think it's very challenging. And I wouldn't want to be the person, quite frankly, trying to navigate that, to be perfectly honest. I think finding ways, Kathleen, I think, mentioned, perhaps it was you, I think it was Kathleen mentioned, collaboration with the public. And I think that's also really, really important.
Not me.
Especially as we develop the larger program, a review process and a public input process, I think, is really integral to a successful program too. While I did speak, about the challenge of project review if they're on site, I'm also a big fan of functional art, so there's that as well. Not to say that has to be on site. There was one other thing here too where it lists, and I understand this is just a draft, but it lists some things that are not included. Packet page 153 under what 1661.40.
That wasn't my question.
I don't have any more comments.
Under application. That first paragraph, it lists some things that it's exclusive costs for architecture, design, engineering, and required studies. It doesn't mention permitting fees. So I just wonder, and again, resolve this later, but I just wonder if the term soft costs might be a better way to address that. Councilmember Price might have some thoughts about that, but.
Oh, I see where you're referring to.
Yeah, because permits aren't listed, for instance, so rather than perhaps overlook something, what all could be captured by just the term soft costs, just as a suggestion. Having to do with, I tend to agree with Councilmember Klein, 1% versus 0.95%. Is that really much of an incentive? It is nice to call it the 1% for art program, but I'm also just as happy with percent for art, without reference to a specific number. I don't know that we're going to be capable of determining this at this point in time, but I'd be just as happy with a 1.1% versus a 1%, and just call it percent for art. If that 1% or 0.1% is a little bit more of an incentive. Maybe Councilmember Klein has thoughts on that since he spoke to that previously. So those, I think, are my comments. You wanted feedback on the percent for art. I don't know if you want to make want us to make a recommendation. I don't know how we could kind of on the fly come up with that kind of a recommendation to council.
It's going to go to the full council, so maybe we can muse about it. I know that Gail is ready to make a motion. I'm going to add one last thing before she does. Again, same page we've been talking about, 127, which is you said developers offered the following suggestions, and I think that's the kind of thing that will come back, such as artist design benches, doorways, drain spouts, and other kinds of elements. So I can't imagine that kind of thing happening, especially with benches that can be very attractive or not. And I'm thinking of Santa Monica and that do you know the Palisades Strip I'm speaking of? Many benches, many pieces of art, lots incorporated into that. It's a 3-mile stretch, so there's plenty of it. So just as a observation, nothing more than that. But I think with that, I'll turn to you, Gail.
Okay. I would like to move that the Policy and Services Committee recommend that the council review and consider the various elements as recommended by the staff in the staff report.
Gail, are you using the staff recommendations or not?
Yes. The Policy and Services Committee recommend that the City Council review and adopt the staff recommendations as listed in the staff report.
Numbers 1 to 4?
Numbers 1 to 4, as stated in the staff report before us.
Second.
So, Gail, do you want to wax on about it a bit?
No, I'll restrain myself. I think the report speaks for itself. I think the comments and observations have been clear, and I look forward to hearing what our other colleagues think about these recommendations at the City Council level. And thank you for your hard work.
A comment on your second?
So, then, I think we've all spoken about how thrilled we are in various ways. I think it's glad to see it moving forward.
Karen?
So, yeah, so how will staff come back with what percent is it going to be? And what kind of incentive for the in lieu instead of on-site? I mean, do you have any thought about that at all, or you need to wax on about that?
I think we'll probably go back to we'll eliminate the incentivization of 0.95 and just keep it at 1%. That it's enough of the in lieu option is enough of an incentive, is really what I gleaned from you.
Well, we also talked about maybe making it a little higher and still incentivize at a lower level. But
that is something that, without more discussion with the city attorney, I would like to table for when we come back in the next, which is number 4 here. Direct staff to return to the committee in 2014 with recommendations to update the municipal percent for art policy. And at that time include that item for discussion in that point.
I would just say, though, once it's in place, it's kind of hard to revise it in such a...
Yeah.
So I think the committee's comments are helpful. It seems that as a policy matter, the committee and perhaps the full council would like a few options in terms of the size of the art contribution. So I think that the staff and the CSD director, Greg Betts, and the city manager will have to think about that. Raina's comment is that really whatever the council wants to do with the private development contribution, really the best practice would be to mirror that with the city's own contribution. And so that's a conversation then that needs to be had with the city manager and the finance director in order to really bring forward a proposal. But I could see some further thought on whether the staff wants to adjust the recommendation on that point, or perhaps call out a couple of options for the council when it goes to council.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. So
You do want to speak to your second?
I want to speak.
So wanted to appreciate Councilmember Price for bringing up the VTA and the various transit authorities and their models. Wayfinding is one of the ways that I also think that public art can be used very, very effectively. It's a weird meeting tonight, isn't it? Chatter going on. Anyway, so as a part of the sense of place development, that sort of thing, I definitely support the program. And one thing that wasn't mentioned specifically, but making for a safer environment too. And I think it's community well-being, I think is how it's stated in here. So maybe that's inferred there, but art can also create for a safer environment and collaboration with. One thing that isn't addressed here is collaboration with other communities, because we have quote-unquote gateways to other communities. I don't know if there's what's been done in terms of those kinds of collaborations.
We have about 5 things on our tickler list for when we come back within 24 months, and that is one of the items on our tickler list.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for all the good work, and I want to appreciate the commission too. This is one of the hardest working commissions I think that we have, and very dedicated. And you have a great chair this year, and really appreciate the work that you've conducted, and the way you run the meetings and run the committee both. So, thank you very much for this program. It's much appreciated, and I look forward to it.
Elise and I really want to recognize the public art commissioners, because we really echo that.
Why don't those of you who are on the commission stand up? Because many of you are here. Good. Thank you for being here.
They've really done a lot of this.
Supporters of public art.
Yes, thank you. We haven't voted yet.
Cheer you on.
And I also wanted to just recognize City Attorney Molly Stump, as well as Amy French in planning, and Peter Pernajad, who worked with us very closely on this, as well as Lalo Perez and Walter Russman. So a lot of people really helped with this, which also reinforces how public art is inherently collaborative. We work with everybody, you know, in the community, throughout the departments in the city, and I think that's our real strength, and we really appreciate our community members and the staff that have helped us.
Larry, you had another comment. We will vote, but I know you wanted to make a comment.
I want to make an amendment, two amendments. One amendment, excuse me. One is to do away with the 95% bargain. This is really pick up on what Karen was talking about. These are our recommendations, the committee's recommendations, and if staff has a different view when it goes to the council, they can say so, but it seems to me what we should be recommending is some type of fixed thing, and we can always change it, but we have to, anyway, so for that reason, I would suggest that we and move to that we amend by eliminating the bargain 9.95%.
Yeah, I agree. You make it, keep it simple.
Okay, since that's the maker and the seconder.
I'm happy.
And the second is really leave it at the status quo, that others may at some point want to change the 1%, but I would suggest that we leave the 1% as is right now.
And I happen to have that very same comment. So, so mine is and just final things. I just want to make sure I'm hearing the 1%, no appeal. The no appeal is important to me. Exemptions you have spoken of, in lieu option, and the one other policy issue, art being maintained by the owner. Am I correct? Okay, I just want to make sure, because these are all policy things that we've discussed, and that those are clear in this. It doesn't make me any less enthusiastic. I just want to make sure that that's clear. And Larry, I appreciate your adding those last two things. So I'm not asking us to each declare our enthusiasm from 1 to 10, but I think voting would be a good idea. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any dissension? Therefore, it passes on a 4-0 vote. And thank you all for coming. We appreciate your being here. Don't forget, it's televised. You could watch it again tomorrow.
That's great. Thank you. Just one point of the committee like to suggest, ordinarily a unanimous committee vote would go on the council's consent agenda. This is a rather significant item. We would anticipate putting it on.
Yeah, no, I would suggest it not go on consent, because otherwise no one can really contain themselves in their enthusiasm.
I'll restrain myself a little.
Thank you for bringing
No,
that forward.
I think this one, we don't do a whole lot of fun stuff in this one. It's, you know, it comes in the enjoyment category. So when we have that opportunity, we'd like to do it. Okay, thank you all. And our second item that's on tonight is the first item, which is the boards and commissions applications revisions, and asking city clerk and staff to come forward. So looking at this tonight, this was actually brought to us in April, and the suggestion was that we have essentially a different type of application and recruitment for boards and commissions, and those revisions are to return to us. So this has been about 6 months in returning to us, and Donna, I will ask you to make a presentation, if you would.
The presentation was that the council, as you just noted, the last time the Policy and Services heard this, they designated council members Price and Holman to work with Ronna, with the Deputy City Clerk and myself, to revise the applications as we're rolling out the new board and commission recruitment program. And so we have worked closely in the past time, and I think a lot of the work came from the council members with their suggestions, and the Deputy City Clerk trying to coordinate to make it. Our goal is to get qualified people to apply for the board and commission, and we're excited about the new program, and we are set to do this January 1, to get off of the program. So we're excited to get these applications approved so we can keep moving.
And as I recollect, with this, the goal was to have applications coming in all year long,
Yes.
to have essentially a rolling application form, and to also talk about, you mentioned 2 other areas, I think. One was to have a fair of some kind of.
Volunteer fair.
Yes, a volunteer fair.
Next spring. And in November, we're going to have a recognition event for the existing board and commission members to thank them for their service.
November 7th, I hope you guys have your calendars marked.
I hope I do. I better check it and see.
We're going to send out more official invitations.
Okay. So those 2 things, in addition to the rolling applications, and I recall also you talked to others who have done something that's not dissimilar, correct?
That's correct. We have reached out to the city clerks in the surrounding areas to see what their role. Actually, what we found out is they're waiting for our program. And that's exciting.
Isn't that typical? Just waiting for Palo Alto, right?
But and we're also doing something different, is we want to have an online application. We want to make it as simple as we can for applicants.
And also, don't I recall you're going to advertise or get the word out in ways that are different from what you've done previously?
Right. Not in a stagnant newspaper
Right.
ad we're looking at. And that's all part of our process that we're going to continually work on. But the goal is to reach out in different ways to revitalize this program.
So, with that, let's bring it to the 2 members of this committee who were tasked with returning with whatever report or suggestions you might have.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you to Councilmember Price we divided these up, so we tried to even out the load. And also, thank you to especially Ronna, because this was a lot of work, as it turned out. I mean, it looked like it was going to be pretty simple, but then as you start going through things, you're looking for inconsistencies and, applicability and such. It ended up being actually quite a lot of work. And you turned things around well and capably, and I really want to recognize you for doing that, because you did a really, really good job. Really good job. The purpose here is to try to be able to make the application process itself educational for the applicant, so they know what they're applying for. And on the other side of that is to make the interview process very efficient and effective, so that we have enough information from the applicants as a part of the application process, so that we don't spend time during that 10 or 15 minutes asking questions that could just as easily have been captured in an application. So hopefully this will lead to a better informed appointment process. And so that's how I looked at this. I did have 2 little comments that I'll come back to later. But that's the purpose. Hope you all agree. And with that, I'll turn it to Councilmember Price.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the overview was very good. Just a couple of comments as it relates to the idea of educating candidates. I think it was a very good addition and an expansion of what we've done in the past, which lists relevant parts of the code, relevant documents that someone who believes they're interested in serving on a commission or a board could then very easily go to these links and become very well informed. It would also help them think and rethink, is this something that they're really interested in? Because rather than just being at the top layer of an application, this approach really encourages them to become more informed and to become more aware of some of the complexities and some of the challenges and the real nature of the work. So I think that was a real improvement. We tried to have a little more parallel structure. We certainly added some questions and really gave some thought to the kind of essay question, open-ended questions as well. And we hope that people believe that this is an improvement. I think the process will be better, and it really does show that we really care about the quality of the applicants and we want to make them feel that they can be successful. This is a lot of time and effort, a lot of volunteer hours are required, and so I think this sort of gives them a good entree to kind of get an understanding of that. So with those comments, I'll stop.
Okay, Larry.
I don't have very many comments because I don't think that this is an area where too much wordsmithing is appropriate. So I'm trying to use the rule that where I might have written it differently. I'm not going to say so until I think it really makes a difference. And one of the few areas that it does, I think, is in question. I'm looking at the first one, and the question repeats itself throughout. And that is question number 7 for the ARB. All those questions start, can you identify? Which makes it seem to me like a final exam. So I would say, please identify a recent topic and go from there. My next comment is, I'm concerned about how long this is going to take for an applicant to fill out. And hopefully we can probably reduce almost all of these by 2 or 3 questions, because this isn't, to use my academic comparison again, this isn't a final exam. This is designed for us to get to know the person to some degree, and for the person also to appreciate this is a lot of work, but there's a variety of ways to do that rather than having them spend too much time. And the question that I would start by eliminating is number 9 on the ARB, which again is repeated, because we've had a similar question on our applications for a long time, and I've found them almost to be uniformly useless. Everybody says, I understand my role is to be an advisor to the council. And okay, glad they understand that. And if somebody ever said, my role is to, what, usurp the role of the council? I don't know what else. They're not going to get very far with it. So I don't think we gain any information by number 9. And I don't have any other recommendations, but I would hope that we could find 1 or 2 other questions that to make this a little less daunting to fill out while we want. So that's where I am. I did have one last question, and it's not really to this group, but of course this got all of us to read this more closely. And we have a question, which is a carryover, which says, excluding your principal residence, do you own real property in Palo Alto? Okay, fine. Or within 2 miles of Palo Alto? And I just wondered, what do we gain by asking people if they own property in Menlo Park or Mountain View or East Palo Alto?
I have no idea. I don't know the source of that question.
No, I don't. I mean, obviously it's some type of conflict of interest thing, but I don't think it gets to our conflict of interest laws, and I just think it's. I don't see what we gain.
But in theory, if you owned property just over the border of a neighboring jurisdiction and we're making a recommendation within 500 feet. Right. But we don't need to ask this question to educate people about that requirement and deal with it as it comes up, which would be extremely rarely.
Well, yeah, and 500 feet isn't 2 miles. So I would suggest we drop throughout the 2 miles and just say Palo Alto. That's it for me.
Okay. As I look through this, I hope there'll be questions they don't answer, because I don't think that every question needed to be answered. And I don't know where you could indicate that to someone, because this is online, but you might think of how you could say these answers don't need to be extensive, they can be brief. You do not have to answer every question. I don't know how you wish to word that, but I think something that gives a little more direction might be advisable. Because I'm going to take a look at this and say, you know, I might be daunted by this and then not apply. So, but all of these certainly are things that we ask from time to time as well. So I certainly recognize that this isn't unlike what we would what we would ask. So the kind of question I do like is the one that says, what about this interests you and why? I think that probably tells me is, almost what I need to know. But I would just, turn it back to you two.
So, yeah, I've always wondered about the 2 mile, but I always assumed it was just some kind of legal requirement, so I don't think either one of us questioned that, so thank you for that. There were 2, I think when we did this, because the questionnaires has been reordered a little bit too, I think we added 2 questions. What was there before, I think is all we added. They've been numbered differently and broken up differently, so I think we added 2 questions. It does say on here too that, don't recall where it is, that they do need to complete the full questionnaire unless that got dropped somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure that does.
We had it in there, but
Did we?
maybe it got dropped. So there were 2 things though that I wanted to bring up, which was, one is on page 12 of the ARB and on page 17 of the HRB. Question 15 for the ARB says, if applicable, please identify a project or projects. I don't know why if applicable is there in either one of those instances, because if you've got an ARB applicant or an HRB applicant, you'd like them to identify a project. So I think we could delete the if applicable.
Do you want me to expand our logic?
Yes,
with
please.
that? The reason why we wanted to add that is because I think this is one that we were talking about, the municipal code not requiring that as a, requiring them to give samples in order to apply. So we were a little hesitant to make it sound like they had to do this in order to complete the application. So I think that's why we added the if applicable.
The code says they don't have to.
The code does not say they have to submit samples, and we weren't even sure if we go to an online system how a sample is going to be submitted yet. So I think we were being a little kind of cautious by adding the if applicable.
Well, the code doesn't say that they have to submit examples, but we always, I mean, I'm trying to think of an example when we don't ask ARB and HRB applicants, like, so give us an example of what you think is a good project or a bad project. And we did add here, like, they could give a project address or provide a link. So, I don't know, if you look at the city attorney, is there any reason why we can't just say, please identify a project or projects?
No, there's no reason why you can't do that if you'd like to do.
Yeah, so I would suggest that we just drop the words if applicable for ARB and HRB.
I would just caution, my fear is that we're going to lose people if we're sounding too it almost becomes a homework assignment.
Yeah.
Find a project in the city, tell us what you like and what you don't like about it, which is great, and some of them will come with that. But I don't want to lose somebody that's moved new to town, that has the experience, that's going to get frightened if they see that I don't have a chance, why should I even bother? That's my fear.
Just to jump in, I had some of that same thing, thinking, get people to apply. We're going to ask all those questions when we interview. We're not going to appoint anyone without interviewing them.
Well, I thought one of the purposes of this whole exercise was so that the interviews themselves would not be going down that road and spending that interview time, asking some of those kind of questions, trying to get these some of these answers ahead of time.
Why?
And again, I think that we like number 16 is not a question. It's just listing. It's just a list.
I was talking to 15 specifically.
I know you were, but we're talking about the numbers of things here. 17 is not a question. It was just basically asking if they're. So there aren't that many questions per se that require anything more than just by rote responses. So because
I thought it was pretty extensive, to be honest.
Because we have 10 minutes. In all the interviews
I
except the planning
actually,
commission.
if you wouldn't mind my saying, I have concerns. Have you ever attended or viewed online or read a report? I mean, it's good if they tell us this, and I think it's a good question to ask, but sometimes when it's in writing, when you see something in writing, it becomes the expectation that you have to.
Well, that's a carryover.
Not that one. I don't.
There was a similar question.
Just have you ever attended a meeting? Yeah. But I mean, but this one got even more in depth. This seems, I've already had this conversation honestly with you that I do have concerns.
And let's not think this isn't cast in stone.
Oh, no.
I mean, we're going to experiment with this, see how it goes. A year from now, if we are using this, we'll probably have some very different observations to make. And we'll have applicants by then who say, wow, I took one look at that and said, I don't know if I want to do it. I took a look at it and said, oh, this will be fun, let me fill it out, you know.
And we will serve it. We get in conversations with the applicants all along the way.
We work a lot with them, so we'll have feedback on this.
And I don't know how, and I'm not sure that the staff knows even like what the format of this is going to be. I think this format is a little bit daunting.
It's not going to look exactly like this. It's going to be online, but there's a few different systems that we're looking at, so I really can't be too worried about what it looks like right now. But it should be, like other online forms that you have filled out.
What do you think of this college application?
So it should be pretty familiar format. It should be
Why are you
easy.
running for office? Do you support it?
That one's not
right?
Yeah.
Write 4 essays.
Then the other thing is, I had, not knowing that Aaron was out, I had a week ago sent in some questions that I had, or some suggestions about some inconsistencies I found, like there are a couple of board and commissions that aren't listed on the list of boards and commissions. So that was only discovered, I only discovered that Aaron was out like Saturday. So staff was going to make a presentation about these recommendations or suggestions.
We were going to make the presentation?
Yes.
Well, I think we were going to answer questions, and we did let Jaime go home because he was waiting for item 1. But very, I think just to summarize though, I mean, I think you brought up some really good points that I think will take some additional staff time and analysis and working with the attorney's office. And, you know, should, you know, the committee and council direct us to do so, we'd be happy to bring it back and take a closer look at the Muni code and what you've suggested and what revisions should be made.
Okay, I was hoping.
It's not really a purchase this item, though. So
I was told previously that this is the time to bring it forward. That's what I was told previously.
Well, let's see if there's some way we can work through this, since we don't have that going to happen tonight. I want to know if we're ready to move the general revisions forward or not. Are we at that point?
I have a comment.
I have a comment.
Yeah, well,
or an opinion.
Well, Gail, do you want to go first, and then Larry?
Yes. I just wanted to say I concur with Councilmember Klein's comment about point number 19, because I think the nuances of policy and working with the council and what you review and how would that work is asking someone a question that they don't really have much information about when they're applying. Original number 9, how would you see your role as a board member when recommending policy and working with the council? I would concur that number 9 should be taken out so that it would be renumbered. And I also concur with the comment made that we need to add the comment that please, you know, brief responses are fine, something to that effect, so people don't feel they have to do a kind of
I think it needs to come back here again, sadly.
Try and get that in on the code.
Right. Because I think we want to make sure that whatever the formatting is, that it's welcoming and that they feel
Could
that
make
this
that
is something
motion.
they can do in, you know, 10 minutes,
You look
not,
exhausted,
you know,
are
an
you?
hour. So
Yeah.
I also
You look
recognize
working
that
hard.
this we'll see how it works
Not
and
used to it.
then come back and go from there. Is it any way that these details, which are cleanup, editing, some of them are administrative sort of issues, could be reviewed by the staff? I don't know, do we need to come back again, or can we move the bulk of this forward?
So why don't
be-
one second. Larry wanted to make a comment, and that might help us move in that direction.
Okay.
Well, I think we need to come back. I don't, I hear all our scheduling things, but I really do think we have too many questions. And I don't want to discourage people from applying. And I think that when we interview people, we do want to have some questions there. I don't really think that there's any reason why we have to have all the answers to a person before we talk to them. I think both the written and the oral are important parts of the application process. And 19 questions seems to me to be about double what we ought to have. I'm glad to give our subcommittee more work to do.
Okay, to come back with a revision?
To come back with a revision, basically cutting in half the number of questions.
Well, if I could just point out one thing, these are 19 is numbered, starting where previously the questionnaire did not start with numbers, so everything now is numbered. So that's how we got to 19.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to compare it to anything. I'm just saying that, look, the comparison I was getting to was a college application. This begins to sound like a college application, and I do want to find out something about how the person thinks. But the key question is actually the one I think that Liz pointed to, which is always the question whatever the person's applying for, whether it's a job or to get into a college or to be on a board or commission, that is, why do you want to do it? Tell them. It's an open-ended question. And if your only answer is, I want to be on the XYZ commission because it seems interesting, you're
I just got to town, and I'd really like to know more about what you do at City Hall. I mean, we do get some of those, though. I just moved here. I'd like to get involved. Maybe this is, remember people we've had who applied for 2 commissions.
I mean, we have Elise.
Yeah.
Elise came from New York. And
No, that isn't the point.
Yeah.
The point is
Yeah.
that a question like that is very open-ended. The person can make of it what he or she wishes. And if they only use a one-sentence answer, that tells you something about the person. Maybe they can get out of the hole that they've dug, but I mean, the responses that usually win are, I've had a lifelong interest in collecting butterflies, and I first collected my first butterfly when I was 8 years old, and it ties into somehow or other what the Planning Commission does. We're trying to people who show us that they can think and that they really have an interest in what we're doing rather than just I don't know, looking for something to spend their time on.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to go that route and to do more revisions, how does that work with the schedule to get this done and ready in time for, because this has to go to the city council, and then, the changes. And do you want it to come back?
Well, if I may, we could still use our existing applications if we're still, I mean, it's not like we're going to stop taking, January 1, we're going to stop doing applications. We can, would be fine.
You can kind of continue to massage it, I think, and maybe streamline what it is and return. Yeah, I don't think that negates anything that we have ongoing. We're moving forward with a new process, and I think this would, this will take us there.
But I guess it would be ideal, though, to have this resolved with the people on this.
Yes, and I think that's, so why don't we say, let's get it done this year? And I think we have, what did we say? We're going to now meet on the 19th of November and see if we can squeeze in a December meeting?
Yes.
Yeah. So we can get it in. I think if we can limit ourselves the next time to maybe, 20 minutes on it instead of, it hasn't been that long tonight. We've been on it about a half an hour. So it's, we haven't, I don't think we, at a point where I'm worried about hanging on for another meeting or so.
So I would move we continue this item and direct staff and our subcommittee to reduce the size of the application by roughly 1/2.
But why don't you say reduce the size without stipulating the 1/2, if you don't mind?
Okay.
And I'm glad to second that. And is there any more discussion? Do you want to carry on about yours? And I don't either. So if we're all comfortable with that, all those in favor?
Well, I just want to make sure that when this comes back, that there'll be answers provided.
So I guess I have a question about that because we had a discussion about this yesterday. So
why don't we move that on this part of it and then
correct.
Come to Karen's question. Okay. Is that okay? So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So Karen, your issue.
So the questions that you ask, I think that the questions that were asked that relate to the application, I believe the clerk has incorporated those. These are suggested code changes and changes to the, I don't know if that is something that is even something that the staff can answer in terms of why this code section says this instead of this, or this code section needs to be updated. We're happy to work with the city attorney's office and bring back code changes, but to me it seemed like it was a separate item from putting together an application for boards and commissions.
So here's why I was told that this was the time to bring it forth. And the other thing is it does apply to this because I tried to bring it up one time previously when we looked at the process. Previously when it went to council, and I was told at that time at the council meeting that this was the time to bring it up. So at least that's what I understood. It does apply directly to this because it says in the applications, it refers people to pieces of code that don't exist. It refers people to pieces of code that have no reference to the particular board or commission. So what I've actually asked for here, almost all of them, not every one of them, but almost all of them are like cleanups. So it's why it seems like it's
cleanup for the application or cleanup to the code?
Cleanup to the code because
all right, so we should double check.
Did you guys do that? In some cases.
When I had discussions, if I may, with the council member, I didn't feel these were applicable to the application for us to get forward with revising the applications. We can take away links until it's fixed through, so it's not going to hold up the applications and lead people to a path of where there's nothing.
Is it aspects of the code that need to be cleaned up in general, or that relate to the applications? Or does it make the application odd or difficult because of the reference to code?
It's mostly the latter. There are people who are also just generally, I went to a lot of effort to seek these out, not to seek them out, but to identify them when I was going through this. There are also, like some boards and commissions that aren't even listed when in the city's webpage where it lists boards and commissions, there's some that aren't even listed. You have to know where to go in the code, like chapter 1649 or chapter 18, blah, 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 to find the ARB and the HRB, I think it is. So it's those kinds of cleanups, but then also there are these references to literally one piece of code that doesn't exist. It's those kinds of things, but they're referred to in the application so people can get informed.
So without laying this all at Molly's feet, is that the kind of thing you can look at and tell us what you think ought to be the next step? I'm looking at the city attorney.
Yes, thank you, Chairness. So I did look at this briefly, and there are a mix of proposals here. Some of them are really quite straight cleanup. Others require more analysis and policy decision about how the council would like to adjust and update the code. That certainly is a project that we can work on. It's, I think it's separate enough from this particular set of work that we wanted to take a pause and get direction from at least the committee and possibly the council as to whether this is a work item that you want us to prioritize. We, we don't think that this is something that is a very straightforward matter that can just be handled as a cleanup and come back on consent. So it will require some staff time, analysis, and work, and then some involvement also from the council. And if that's an item that the council does want us to prioritize and spend time working on in the next period of time, we're happy to do that, but we would look for that direction.
Why don't you give us an idea in retro, in general, of how much time or energy that would actually take? And then I think that's probably the kind of thing that does need to go to the council to say, is this something you want to put resources into? Because it sounds as though this could be fairly extensive.
So I am happy to do that. I'm not comfortable doing that as I sit here today.
No, please no. No, no.
There's quite a bit of work that Councilmember Woolman has done to elucidate a number of issues.
So perhaps at the next meeting, we could slip a piece in about what that would actually take to do that, and give us an overall general.
And in the meantime, we're happy to work with the clerk, which is what I thought the main piece was on the update to the website, certainly, and cleaning up any of the missing links with the new website. However, the clerk did just indicate to me that some of the code sections that are referenced are the correct code sections, so we need to go back and check that. So
what I was trying to point out in my comments here was that, there's reference to, I'll just make it up, Title 16 for the ARB. But if someone's just applying and they go to Title 16, there's nothing there that tells you there's anything there to do with the ARB. So just if the language was changed, say, embedded within Chapter 16 or whatever the language that somebody wanted to say, because right now it looks like a blind alley. So those kinds of things. And then there is literally one which just, it refers you to a piece of code and it's reserved for future use. So it really refers you to someplace.
And just to remind us, this is a general discussion at this point. We're not on a motion. We're not,
Right.
we're simply referencing something that has to do with this item. Larry?
Well, I'm agreeing with that. I think that the staff certainly doesn't need any motion to remove links to non-existent sections. That's just obvious. And I think that's a service that you've done, Karen, to point out that those links don't make any sense. But beyond that, I think that when you talk about amending the code, that's a not trivial assignment, and I think that doesn't belong on our discussion tonight. And I think that we need to know how much time Molly's staff would be spending on that before.
Which is why I asked her if she would give us that general idea.
Yes, and I think maybe you can find a way to put that on get the manager or the mayor to put it on the agenda. But I don't think we want to run willy-nilly into that. We've put our staff, whether it's the attorney's office or other portions, under a lot of pressure. And I'd like to see this get changed. Having read what you wrote, and I'll assume for the moment that most, if not all of it, is right. Still, it's not as simple as just somebody writing this up. It will cost time and money, and frankly, I have higher priorities for our staff right now than this. And I remind myself that almost all cities, charters, state laws, federal laws, inevitably over time get problems like this. And every once in a while you'll see a magazine search for some humor by saying, do you know that XY city still has an ordinance about horses and buggies in town? Or things of that nature.
Usually references a Texas town.
Certainly would. But it just happens over time. And the reason it happens is that those governments have more important things to focus on, so they don't worry each year whether they still have references to horses and buggies.
But we're not referring people to that piece of the...
Well, I agreed with you on that, Karen, but the rest of it, no, we're getting by. So, clean it up. But I mean, as we did a few years ago, maybe 20 years ago now, when we made a wholesale bunch of changes that didn't change any substance, except for the very meaningful one of doing away with references just to he and him by making our pronouns either gender neutral or saying him/her, things of that nature, which had its own merits. But some of these other things,
So I think where we are at this point is, Molly, you will give us kind of a general idea. There are some things that I'm hearing both the ACM and the clerk say they can work out together. And I think that we will, if possible, Sheila, try to bring this issue back for a short time and a vote in December. Does that work for everyone?
I thought we were talking about November, maybe?
We could try November. I don't know. I'm about to go through this calendar with everyone and see whether or not we can work that out. Could we just briefly take a look at the calendar, because I don't want us to get into a hole here. As I'm looking at this, because a number of things have changed, I think October is still the same, but as I flip to November, I think we now have a special meeting on the 12th. Is that
Council
correct?
meeting on the 12th, that is correct.
That's going to change the...
Let's see.
No, special council
Council
meeting.
meeting.
Council meeting is on the 12th.
Right.
Right. And there's now a meeting of this committee.
I'm sorry?
I don't know that I have a time yet. We have to see if there's any closed sessions.
I just always put 6 down.
Usually 6 is a good
Yeah, covers it. And then what I have some concern about on the 19th, though, is that you've got a finance committee at 7. So the question is, can they meet in there and we can meet in here? And
Then we would tell the Park and Recreation Commission they would have to meet at a
they would have to
different
find another
location.
place.
Yes.
Okay.
We can meet at the downtown Everett.
No, we can't now because they've been using that since they moved around the libraries. It's not an open room anymore.
That'll be your issue.
Just
So-
one thing to point out with those dual committee meetings is that there are sometimes staff that are required
And
to
that's
be in
what
2
I
places at one time,
had a
depending
concern
on what's on
about.
those calendars.
So, and that is probably why somebody had said yesterday, the 19th or the 20th. Am I correct, Sheila? There is a.
Yeah, you said the, hold on, I have it. The 19th, 20th, or 26th.
And I ruled out the 26th. I said I thought that got so close to Thanksgiving that if
And I
people
was
are going to
hoping
heading,
for that.
yeah, that if people are heading out of town, that would be an issue. And I'm going to guess probably the planning commission will not meet on the 27th either, but I could be wrong. Maybe they're going to meet the night before Thanksgiving. I don't know. So is this an issue between the 19th and the 20th? I hadn't realized finance met on the 19th.
We've had meetings with them on the same night.
Shuffle those people back and forth, right?
We usually work it out. Right. Does anyone know what's on finance that night?
I have the tentative agenda. Hold on. Didn't I just?
And
I got it right here.
And is this group comfortable meeting at 6 as we have been? Okay. So that way, even if they're meeting as well, we could get items on where we need Jim or council to be there for us.
So on the 19th, I have the CAFR for 2013, the close, the CIP status report, inventory management audit. That's finance. What you had for policy and services for the 12th, which is now
The 19th.
right, is the auditor's office quarterly report, the team program, hiring a state lobbyist, draft ordinance for the completion of residential construction projects.
Auditor's Office quarterly report, didn't we do that the last meeting?
We did.
Can't tell you. Did we?
So that would be the auditor then, that would be shuffling back and forth between those two
No, we
meetings.
already did that item.
Oh, you did that.
They send me titles, so this is all draft. I don't think that's going to be your time.
It's probably the next
Anyway.
report because they were late.
Yeah, I think
A few
so.
times.
I think this one is. But, so,
So are we meeting on the 19th?
Or the,
Yeah, well,
I think we're meeting on the 19th, and we've said we'll start at 6 o'clock, and we will attempt to put any items that need, whomever may need to be at the 7 o'clock meeting as well on at 6 o'clock. So I think we can figure out how to do that. Okay, Sheila, so you and I'll put our heads together and figure out how to pull the, when to have the boards and commissions come back as well, when we realize, when we figure whatever else we can get through.
And we're
well,
meeting,
and there's 2 items, right? It's the
Yes.
changes to application and the work assessment.
Yeah, uh-huh.
and we're meeting December 10th, right?
Oh, I didn't have that down, so thank you.
It's on the 10th.
I don't have that in front of me.
It is on.
Okay, good. My phone went dead again. I'm telling you, I've got to carry a charger with me, so I can't put it down, but December 10th, okay.
Is that why you took my phone?
You know, I can't believe I actually stuck it in there, but it's possible. But mine's a different color. So is there anything else we need to discuss more as we're doing more casually right now? Are we okay? I think we need to wish Molly a great time in New York, don't you? Taking her daughter for the first time to New York.
Nice.
Yeah. Has she ridden on a subway before?
BART, maybe not like New York.
Yeah. My friend said, he was a little older, he was about 16, he said, we live in such a horizontal city, Mom. It's funny to live to be in a vertical one. Because it's a vertical city. Don't forget how windy it is.
Okay.
Take jackets. It is, yeah. And I went online, the next few days are rainy.
Oh.
Yeah. Not cold, just a bit rainy.
You'll have to be in the stores then.
Oh, no. You'll have to go to that one we discussed, yes.
What happened to the museums?
Oh, museums. Okay, if there's nothing anyone wishes to add, I think we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Especially thank you, staff. Appreciate that. And is it Elise? Is it Elise? It is Elise, right? I didn't even get
Oh, the wrong person.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for being here. Good.